Hello everyone, and welcome to another little news video that I'm making today. Just like the last one, it's just me, Mike. No Nick, no Travis, no CJ. I just wanted to make this really quickly because something was recently announced. Kind of a long time ago, actually. I guess I could have waited, but I didn't want to anymore, so this is just going to be me talking today. And we're going to be talking about the future of Nintendo eSports and online, specifically because of two events that are going to be coming at E3. So before we get into the future of Nintendo and the eSports community, I want to talk about these two major events. Now, the first one will be taking place on June 11th at 6:30 Eastern Time, and that is the Splatoon 2 World Championships. Now, this is going to feature 4 of the best Squid Squads, is the way they put on their website, which sounds super adorable. But 4 of the best Squid teams, or like the Splatoon 2 teams from around the world, will be competing. And there's the semifinals, which are what's taking place June 11th at the time I said. And then June 12th will be the grand finals. And so this is going to be super awesome. Again, Splatoon 2 has been the game that Nintendo, I feel like, has been promoting as its, I don't know if esports is the right word, but they've hosted a lot of tournaments for Splatoon. They constantly update the game with new maps, and they're rotating it, and they seem to put a lot of effort into the ranked matches in that game. So clearly Nintendo looks at this game as something that can dominate the esports scene. Not as much in America. I think in Japan it's a lot more popular than it is here. Obviously, we don't really watch a lot of streams, and Splatoon 2 doesn't really dominate the Twitch scene as much. But it's something that Nintendo clearly cares about. And I think that doing this E3 tournament, I think a lot of people are going to be watching Splatoon 2, mostly because Nintendo is like actually officially sponsoring this. This is something that they're running and endorsing, and I think that's going to go a long way. Again, though, this is the lesser of the two things that I want to talk about. As I mentioned, June 12th is the grand finale. The time has yet to be announced, but as soon as the Splatoon 2 World Championship ends, something called the Smash Bros. Invitational will be beginning. And this is where they're going to showcase the new game for the Nintendo Switch. And this is going to be crazy. Now, this is not just some dinky little tournaments. Some of the players that are going to be there include Armada, Plup, Mango, Zero, Mr. R, Lucky. And one of the crazy things is that Nairo and Leffen are backup contestants, so they're not even a part of the main squad. They're backups in case someone else drops out or something. That's crazy. That is an all-star squad right there, which is super awesome because it shows that Nintendo, for one, is paying attention to the people that dominate their scene. Nintendo and Smash Bros. As an esports game has been a very complicated relationship, I would say. At times, it seems like they're trying to embrace it, and then at times, they've pretty much outright said, we don't want this to be an esports competitive game. We want it to be a casual party type game, where family members play it or friends play it for casual fun. And that's why they have all the items, the randomness on stages, the variety of characters. They do that because they want it to be sort of a party casual game. But clearly with this Smash Bros. Invitational, that's not what they're going for. They are, in this situation, going for an esports scene. And I read an interesting article the other day that sort of talked about how this could influence the future of Nintendo in terms of esports. Because at the moment, Nintendo doesn't really embrace it. When you think of Nintendo, or when you think of esports overall, you tend to think of games like League of Legends. You tend to think of Dota. You think of Hearthstone, these types of games, CSGO. And the reason for this, at least I would theorize, is that companies like Blizzard, which have numerous games in the esports scene, endorse it. They actively get involved with it. They're actively engaged in it. They do things to promote this type of stuff. Blizzard hosts their own tournaments for their games. And so stuff like that I feel like is so important. Nintendo hasn't really done that. They've done it on a small scale, and they've certainly done it in Japan, as I mentioned, for games like Splatoon 2. But Smash Bros. Has been something that has sort of independently run itself. And I think that's why Smash Bros., as big as it is, never really breaches that seam as like becoming one of the major ones, because Nintendo has never really taken an active stance in it. Now again, this is just my opinion. If you disagree, you can let me know in the comments below. So this Super Smash Bros. Invitational that they're doing at E3, I think could be huge in terms of changing that dynamic. This could be where Nintendo finally sees, hey, if we embrace Super Smash Bros. As sort of a competitive game as well as sort of a party casual game, we can make tons and tons of money off this, far more than they've made in the past off of this. And so if this tournament goes well, I think it could lead to some incredible changes in the future for Nintendo in the esports scene. Now, we've been talking a lot about Smash Bros, and I mentioned Splatoon 2 as well, but if these things go successful, it could change things for other franchises as well, like Pokemon or Mario Kart. Now, Pokemon isn't a Nintendo franchise, but it's, let's be honest, is basically a Nintendo franchise. It's never come out for a system outside of a Nintendo console, unless you count the iPhone, I guess. And so Pokemon and Nintendo pretty much go hand in hand. And so the interesting thing about that is Pokemon is another game that has an esports following to a certain extent that's never really been embraced by Nintendo. They do have their battles online, and recent games have done things to sort of promote sort of this fair and balanced competition, but they've never really hosted major tournaments for it. This is something that they could do in the future. Pokemon is a major franchise for Nintendo, and if they see, hey, look, people love our Smash Bros. Competitions, people love our Splatoon competitions, we might see more Pokemon tournaments pop up in the future. And the new game that's coming out for the Nintendo Switch might also have more of an online aspect. Again, the DS ones and all the handheld ones have had online, but barely. You know, I think Pokemon is one of those games that does have an online community, and most of the time when you see like these online Pokemon tournaments, it's not even through some of the mainstream games. And so I think that's something that Nintendo could end up seeing and then changing. And then the other one is Mario Kart. Mario Kart is complete dumb luck, right? I think a lot of us can say that. Typically the best person will win, I can admit that, but a lot of times they don't. If you've seen our past Mario Kart videos, we had a few pre's where Matt, one of the Nintendudez, won a lot, and he's arguably one of the worst. But you get the lucky items at the end of the race, and that's all you really need to win. You get a bullet bill followed by 3 red shells. You could go from 10th place to 1st place easily. Nintendo, again, could change that in the next installment whenever Mario Kart 9 comes out. They could still have that aspect, but then they could also feature modes that are more competition-oriented, things that sort of favor people that want a fair, balanced racing game. And Mario Kart would be perfect for that. Mario Kart is really the interesting one, because there's never tournaments for that game, because it's never really been made in a way that would allow for it. There's been some minor ones, but I've never heard anyone talk about, ooh, I'm going to go to this Mario Kart tournament. That's something that could change as well. It's a popular racing franchise, arguably the most popular racing franchise out there, because, you know, games like Gran Turismo sort of fallen out of the wayside, and Forza and stuff are Microsoft only. So Mario Kart can dominate the esports scene in terms of racing games. Really, when you think about it, there's no racing game in esports at the moment. This could be the #1 game in that regard if Nintendo chooses to embrace that. My prediction is that how Smash Bros. Switch Invitational goes and how the Splatoon 2 World Championship goes at E3 this year will go a long way in determining that. And so we're going to watch these tournaments, and we're going to laugh, and we're going to have a fun time. You know, everyone likes watching these great players play these games, but I think there's a lot more at stake than just what these players are playing for. I think everyone that tunes in to watch these live streams, everyone that's there in the audience, is going to make a difference, because the more people that show up, the more Nintendo's going to realize that this is a scene that they have to embrace. This is where games are moving these days, and I think Nintendo's starting to realize that. I think their online subscription service that I talked about in the last video shows that they're sort of understanding, hey, we need to promote our online servers. We need to do things that allow people to sort of engage more with us on this international level, and that's what these online services are all about. Esports is sort of the next one, and I think Nintendo is slowly starting to embrace this. And so these two tournaments are going to be huge deciding factors, and I'm super excited to see what goes on with these and the aftermath of it. Obviously, Smash Bros. Is going to be huge in the online departments, but I do think this tournament is going to affect games like Pokemon and Mario Kart. There's been no talk of Mario Kart 9 yet, but there's been a lot of talk about the new Pokemon game that's coming out. And I think we're going to have to watch closely to see if there's any correlation. You know, with online becoming a bigger and bigger thing for Nintendo, what's going to happen with that? When Mario Party 11 comes out, is that going to have an online mode? And potentially, is there going to be some sort of competition in that game as well that Nintendo might try to embrace? The sky's the limit, and Nintendo's such a popular franchise. If they start sponsoring more Smash Bros. Tournaments in America as well as Japan, if they start pushing for more Pokemon tournaments, if they start pushing for more Splatoon 2 tournaments in America, Nintendo could dominate the sports scene in the same way that Blizzard does. They just haven't tried yet. So, again, that's all I have to say for this. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. If you think it's a good idea for Nintendo to embrace esports or a bad idea, how you feel the Smash Bros. Invitational and the Splatoon 2 tournament will influence it, if you think it's going to be a big deal like me, or if you don't think it's going to matter at all. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Do you think Nintendo can be a top player in the esports scene if they try? That's something else I'm curious to know. Or do you think if they tried, it would fall flat? These are all things I'd love to talk about with you guys, and I'm sure Nick would too if he responds to the comments as well. So leave that in the comment section below. If there's any other topics you'd like to see just me talk about alone, or for a future podcast, leave that in the comment section as well. There's tons of stuff for us to communicate about. So yeah, see you guys in the next one.